Hey everyone, welcome back to CIS 39. Today we are going to be covering lesson number 17 on surface painting with PTex. And I am not going to talk about the final project today. I'm going to make a separate video for that and upload that hopefully in the next couple days so you guys can get working on your final projects. All right, so what is PTex? PTex is a method you can use in Mudbox to paint directly onto high definition models, and then even if they don't have UV maps, you can then transfer the color from the high poly to the game model in Mudbox and export those image files for use in your game. All right, so let's go ahead and come over here. All right, so the files that we're going to download are all the ones that down here. Notice that it says that for the handout that you shouldn't use it. That's because I went through and made a bunch of changes today. All right, so we need to make a new project to download all these new files into. So I'm going to go ahead and start Maya. And while it's doing that, I just want to note that the toolbox subd FBX, that's something that you created in the last lesson. And then the game model FBX, that's also something you created in the last lesson. But I went ahead and provided those for you in case you weren't able to get through the last lesson or if you had technical difficulties. So you can just use these as your startup files. Okay, so let's go over to Maya. All right. So not going to do anything too fancy over here, just going to make a new project. So File, Project Window, New. I'll call this capital P, capital T, E, X, PTex project. And put this on my computer's desktop. Okay, next I'm going to go ahead to File and Save Scene As. And I'm going to call this Game Model. So we're not going to do a whole lot in Maya, actually. All we're going to do in Maya is reassemble all the image files and assign them to the material for the model. So we'll be doing most of our work in Mudbox today. Okay, next I'm going to go ahead and import the, and it always goes into data for some reason. You're going to want to go into wherever you saved it. So that would be source images. I'm sorry, scenes. And it's not there. Oh, I didn't download it yet. So let's go ahead and, where is the window? There it is. All right, so right click, save link as. Okay. So I'm just putting those first two files into my scenes folder for my project. All right, and since we're here, let's go ahead and download the image files. This is a wood texture and a metal texture that we're going to use to stencil. We'll put those into the project's source images folder. Okay, that's all we need from the website. So let's go back over to here, and there they are. So we are going to want the game FBX to be imported into our scene. And we got this guy right here. All right, so let's go ahead and save one more time. And then I'm going to close Maya and open up Mudbox. And I'm going to go ahead and pause while I do that. Okay, so here we are in Mudbox. All right. So I'm going to start off by by importing the Subdivision model that we downloaded. And so I'm going to go to my scenes folder for my project that I just made and look for the Subdivision version of the toolbox. And I forgot to do something. So I need to make sure to turn off importing materials and textures. So we're going to have to redo that step. Import materials and textures should be off. Later it needs to be on when we import the game model, but we'll see that in just a second. So I'm going to go ahead and just make a new scene. Don't save. Close. And then re-import the subdivision model using the default material. There we go, the default material in Mudbox. Okay, so for your subdivision options, those should be the same as they were for the last lesson. The only thing you want turned on is preserve hard edges and smooth positions. And we'll sub this up. Now it says to subdivide, well, it used to say in the old handout that I had on there, but you guys should subdivide it up to level 5. Let's see, I'm worried about my system getting laggy. I'll go ahead and take the chance. So we'll go up to level 5. All right, to have sufficient detail on the model when we go to stencil it. I'm going to turn off the grid by right-clicking and choosing grid. Okay, so we subdivided this up. Now we're ready to go ahead and stencil it. Now, you could do it just like we did last time using the simple stencils, but there's a couple problems with the way we did it last time, and I'll show you why. So I'm going to go ahead and start off by just creating a new layer. Call this the wood layer, and then turn on my wood stencil. Okay, so let's go ahead and try to line up the places where there's gaps between the wood very, very closely with the model. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom that in like so. So I'm going to press Q just to make sure that I'm lining things up. So I've got this line right here lined up with the top, and this line down here lined up with the bottom. Okay, so let's say that I go ahead and stencil that in like we normally do. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and rotate it from the front view to the back view and start stenciling back here. And let's look at what happened. I'm going to turn the stencil off, and you can see that the lines don't match up. Even though I rotated it using the cube, I get these big mismatches between lines. And that comes from something related to the camera, the perspective camera. So what the perspective camera attempts to do is make it look like things look in real life. So for example, if you stand on a set of train tracks and you stare out and they're going straight out in front of you, they tend to look like they're converging towards each other the further they get away from you. And that's a perspective warping that happens in the way that we visually process information. And we can simulate that warping in a computer. So we actually need to turn that off. So I'm going to undo all my stencil work here. So we actually need to turn off that feature of that warping by making the perspective camera temporarily orthographic by clicking this button right here, and you'll see that makes the object look quite warped. All right, but if we have the camera in orthographic view, we won't get that mismatch on the lines when we use the view cube to stencil onto the object. So just real quick, I'm not going to line things up yet because there's one more thing that I want to talk about. So I'm going to press S on the keyboard and right mouse click to scale this in, and then line it up. And then just to illustrate that the lines are going to now line up, we'll go ahead and just stencil real quick. I'm going to undo this in a second, but then I'm going to view cube, rotate it, and then stencil again over here on the side. And then I'm going to turn perspective off, or I'm sorry, orthographic off. And you can see now I get a perfect alignment between my lines. All right, so let's undo those once again, and let's learn another trick. So I'm going to go back here and turn orthographic back on, and turn the boards back on. Okay, now the other thing that can be a little bit annoying is when you go to stencil, you want to cleanly separate the faces so that they don't bleed over into each other. Sometimes you just have to be very careful when you're stenciling, but other times you can take advantage of the fact that there's a difference in angles between the two faces that you're stenciling on. So if I just start to stencil as is, it's going to go all the way up and into the place where we want to have a metal texture later on for the lid. All right, so what we can do is for any brush, there's an option called at the bottom, the fall off, and an option here called fall off based on facing angle. And if I just turn that on and hover over it, hopefully you guys can see the pop-up, you can. We can control how the stamp works based on the angle between the camera and the thing that we're trying to stencil onto. All right, now without getting into a big explanation between the difference of the two, I'll just tell you that you want to make this a small number like 30, and this 0. And what that'll do is it'll make it so that when we go to, no, not Q, it'll make it, I'm going to press enter, and then press Q up here. Is it still doing it? Yeah, it's still putting Q down here. All right, enter, and then let me just move the camera up here. There we go. All right, and then press Q. Okay, so now it'll make it so that when I stencil, anything that is at an angle that is not what I specified, it will not paint on. And look at that, we can get a really clean line between the boards and the thing that we don't want painted. All right, so there's two tricks that you can use to get a nice stencil on your model when you're working. All right, so let's go ahead and undo what I did one more time. Go back to layers, make sure I'm in my wood layer, and let's line that stencil up better. So I'm going to line up the lines of that thing so that they match the top and the bottom. So I want roughly the same distance between here and here and here and here, so that when I scale, they should more or less line up like that. Okay, let me make sure I have the perspective camera set to orthographic. I do, so now I can go ahead and start stenciling. And let me make sure that I have that this still set to 30, and it looks like I'm all set. So I can go ahead and just start to stencil in the boards like so. You just want to make sure that you have a nice even amount. So I'm going to go ahead and rotate it. Oh, was I not lined on front perfectly? Oh, bummer. All right, I gotta have to do that one more time. There we go. Okay. Now the other thing that you can't see that's being prevented right now is it's not stretching the stencil around the sides because of that fall off setting as well. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just click on these little arrows here on the view cube. And this time I got to be careful when I'm near the top because I can't use that feature to prevent me from drawing up here. So I just got to be careful that I don't go too high or make the brush smaller. And make sure that I don't get too much on the lid. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and pause and I'm going to finish. Well, I guess it doesn't take very long. I'll do one more and then I'll pause the recording and finish up so you guys don't have to watch me do it. Okay, so just very quickly stenciling this in here. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and pause and finish up the front for you guys. Okay, so there's the front. I just quickly went in here and stenciled this in. All right, let's go ahead and go back to the camera. And I'm going to turn orthographic off. And then there's our finished wood for the box, nicely lining up here on the sides. Okay, next we're going to go ahead and stencil in the metal for the top of the toolbox. I'm going to find that metal texture. And I'm going to tile it just like we did last time. Okay, and then get the scale using S to where I want it. Next, I'm going to use the view cube again. I'm going to click on the corner like this. And then I'm going to go ahead and rotate it up. And when I rotate up, it's important that I don't turn it as I rotate it up. I want to try to get it as flat as I can, like so. And then I'm going to go back to my sculpt tool and again, make sure that that hasn't changed. And then it may take a couple runs. So you can see it is bleeding a little bit into the bottom. And then the other thing I forgot to do is make a layer for that. So let's go ahead and do that too. Call that metal. All right. Why is that not turning on? Okay, there it is. Why is Q not working? Okay, it looks like my Q, my Q button keeps not working. Okay, there we go. I think it's because it's tabbing over to the other application. Okay, so yeah, so we don't want it to bleed over into the bottom like that. So what we can do is just try to lower the angle. Let's try 20 instead of 30 and see if that works. That fixed it. All right. Okay, so let's go ahead and do the same thing for this side over here. There we go. Okay. All right, next we'll do the top. Okay, and then for the back, again, we're just going to have to be careful that we don't stencil onto other things. And I'm going to go ahead and make the camera orthographic for this one. And I'm going to have to use S and scale this down to make sure that it's consistent with the size of the other ones that I made. Doesn't have to be exact, just has to be close. And again, there's no magic for this one. You're just going to have to be careful when you paint down here that you don't draw onto things that you don't want to draw. Okay. It looks so weird from the orthographic view. All right. Last one. And for this one, I'm going to stencil everything but that little lip, whatever we call it, vent. So I'm actually going to go back. And it looks like it didn't do anything on it except for right up here at the top. So I'm going to go to the erase tool and erase what I don't want. And it's not, hopefully it's not doing, yeah, it's not. So again, you just got to be careful when you come in here. Oh, deleted a little bit of that guy, but that's okay. All right, I like it. Okay, so there's our metal lid. Okay, so you can see the quality of this is a lot better than what we did last time where we just kind of ran through really quick. It looks a lot better. All right, let's move on. So next, we are going to add a little bit of wear and tear just like we did before. I'm only going to add one thing, but again, I encourage you guys to be more creative. So let's just go ahead and turn off these two. And then just turn tile off on this one. Scale it up. And rotate it too. So remember, there's all your shortcuts for rotating stuff. And then I press Control so that it pushes in. And it did nothing because I'm on erase. Okay, so just add in some nice random wear and tear. Okay, looks good. Somebody scratched up your toolbox. Okay, let's do one more over here too. Let's do a different pattern. What is this? Some kind of rust or something like that. So again, use Control so that it pushes in. Some rust got on my wood. Explain that one. Don't know. All right, again, it just kind of breaks up the uniformity of everything, makes it look a little bit more natural. Okay, so there we go. All right, so that's pretty much what we did last time with the exception of how to get better accuracy when you're stenciling using the orthographic mode and the fall off on the brush to prevent it from bleeding over into places that you don't want, which we're not going to need that anymore, so I'm going to turn that off. And also notice that over here that it reverted to 60-20. It does that every once in a while. I don't know why. But if you notice that it's not working, that the fall off is not preventing it from going over into the wrong place, go ahead and pop over here and take a quick look and make sure that it hasn't reverted back to 60-20. And then you have to reset it back to 30-0 or 20-0 to get it to work. Okay? All right, so hopefully you all agree that this looks better than what we did last time. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to color this. To do that, we need to create a PTex version of this model. And we also need to import our game model so that we have something to bake onto. So let's go ahead and start by importing the game model. Now we're going to have to, over here in object list, you can see that this box has something called a default material. Now we're going to be baking normal maps, ambient occlusion maps, and color maps, and those all need to be assigned to a material. Now, if we import and we don't give it a brand new material, then it's going to cause problems. It's going to pile the things on top of each other and look incorrect. So in Maya, when you might notice that the game model has a blend material applied to it. So when I import it into here, I'm going to have two materials. So I need to go back to Windows, Preferences, and then FBX, and I need to turn the option for Import Materials and Edges back on. All right, so we do want it to import the Maya materials from the game model. So let's go to File, and then let's go to Import. And then go to your game model and open that. So if I turn off, so now you can see we have the default material and blend 1 that comes from Maya. And I'm going to go ahead and turn off the high-res version. So you can see there's the game model that we opened up in Maya earlier in the lesson. Okay, I'm going to rename this high poly, just to make it easier. Okay. All right, so we are ready to do some PTex. Let's go ahead and turn the game model off for a minute. And then what we need to do to make a PTex on this is we need to step down to level 0 for it. So I'm going to press page down over and over and over until I get to level 0. And then I'm going to come over here to UVs and maps and go to PTex setup. Okay, so you can see it puts a nice even distribution around your model, even though it doesn't necessarily have to have any UVs on it. So I'm going to go ahead and click on, and if you get a pop-up window that says something with some informational stuff, you can just close it. All right, and so all you got to do is click done. That's it. And there, it is ready to be PTex painted. Okay, it's yellow because it's selected right now, right here. All right, so we need someplace for the color to go on the high-res model. So we're going to go ahead and click on layers. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, that's because that's on the high poly version of the model. Oh, goodness. Oh, because I'm in sculpt. Duh. Okay, so I need to go over to paint. Okay, so we need a new layer for the PTex stuff to get painted into. So I'm going to click on this little button right here. And then I'm going to call this color. It should go in the diffuse channel. That is true. And it's a PTex file. That's true as well. So click on OK. All right, there we go. Okay, we are ready to start painting. So I'm going to press Control D to deselect the model. I might have to do that again here in just a second. And I'm going to hit page up and step back up to level 5. All right, so we're all set to paint on this now. So now we're going to use a different tab. We're going to move over to Paint Tools. And we are going to be using what is called Paint Projection. And with Paint Projection, we can take any stencil that we want and color that into the PTex layer like so. I'm going to press Q to turn the stencil off. So there you go. So it's really easy to paint any image file onto your model. So let's undo that. Okay, so this is where we're going to use that wood and metal texture. So I'm going to go ahead and go down here to this tiny button under Stencil, click on that and choose Add Stencil. And then you're going to browse to your project source images folder, and I'm going to import the wood and the metal. And you'll see those will end up down here at the end. So there's my wood, there's my metal. Okay. All right, it got rotated a little bit. So I'm going to press S and just make it more oriented towards the box. And let's scale it up a little bit. Okay. We can use the paint projections fall off feature just like we did with the stencil. So I'm going to go ahead and go here to perspective, turn on orthographic, and then use Control plus Alt to bring these both closer at the same time. All right, let's see. Let's make sure we're lined up nice and even. And let's go to our fall off settings and change those to 30 and 0. Let's give it a test. And it's not working. Why not? Let me check something. Let's try lowering this down even further to 20. Oops, gotta turn the stencil back on. All right, and there we go. Okay. Now you'll notice when you do this that, let's see. You'll notice when you do this that if I come over here, I'm going to go ahead and use Control plus Alt to move both at the same time and dolly into the corners. Press Q to turn the wood off. So you'll notice that it doesn't pick up some parts of it here. So for those, you're going to have to manually go in and do it without the fall off turned on there. It also looks like it picked up some stuff up here that it shouldn't have. So I'm going to make the brush smaller. And then I think, is there eraser in here? Paint erase. I'm just going to erase any place that it bled over on accident. Okay, then I'm going to come back here to projection, turn the stencil back on with Q, and then I'm going to turn fall off, make the brush really tiny, and then just touch up those corners where I missed it. Now it doesn't matter if the bottom gets bled over onto, because you're not going to see it. And then try not to go too far over, and you'll see why in just a second. Just making sure to pick up all those little pieces. Okay, now the reason you don't want to go too far over, go back to here, I'm going to do it bad on purpose. If I make my brush really large, let's say I go, oh, look, Q. If I go, okay, there, that you know, covered up the side, real nice, looks good. Problem is that it will bleed, and you'll get these bad looking stretch marks from the brush bleeding over the side. So you don't want to do that. You want to be really careful when you go through and just minimize that stretching as much as possible. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and do some more painting. This fall off is not going to help us here. So we just got to be careful when we go to stencil that we don't paint onto the top. Again, make the brush really tiny so it minimizes the amount of bleed over that you get on the sides. Make the brush bigger to finish off inside of it. Starting to look like wood. Okay. All right, I'm going to go ahead and continue doing this. And again, I'm going to pause and just do this really quickly so that you guys can get through this video in a good amount of time. Okay, so there I went ahead and painted that while it was paused. All right. And last one over here, same thing. Just paint this really quick. Actually, I guess I could show you. Well, yeah, I'll just do it real quick. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and turn the cameras. So I went ahead and paused it and just painted that really quick. All right, so there's orthographic. Let's turn that off. Okay, and then I'm just going to go ahead and kind of look around the sides and look for places where there's stretching. It looks like I got pretty good, lucky that there's no bad stretching on the sides of it. So there you go. So our wood is all, oh, I got some stuff up here. So let's erase that real quick. There we go. Nice clean lines around the box. So it's like, the nice thing about stencils, it's like it really lowers the barrier to entry when it comes to game art, because you don't have to know all these nitty gritty details about stuff. You just get pictures off the internet of stuff, stencil it into your model, and you got your job done. Now, like I said, if there's stretching down here on the bottom, that's okay if it doesn't look good. And the other thing you can do is if you got bad stretching, what you can do is like just point at it, point at the part that is stretching from an angle like this, and then stencil over the top of it that way. It'll minimize the look of the stretching when you do it. So you can just come over the top of it like that. Now it may make it like not really match up very well, but since this is such an arbitrary texture anyways, people probably wouldn't know. Okay, so next we're going to go ahead and do the lid. And this is going to be very similar to what we did for the stencil. So we're going to use our metal texture for this one. Okay, and make sure that we have our fall off set. There we go. Oops. Okay. Okay. And do the top. Actually, I guess we can do the back over here. Again, just be careful around that top line. Okay, and then the front. confused. There we go. Okay, and there's a lot of places where I'm going to have to go back and touch up, but all right, that's good. All right, so let's go ahead and turn the, oh, orthographic wasn't turned on in the first place. What do you know? Okay, so next let's go ahead and touch up all these places where it's missing stuff. Wait, that's weird. Oh, never mind. I had a different thought. Okay, anyways, so just gonna fix up these places by painting on them from an angle of, is fall off still turned on? It is, or yeah, turn that off when you're fixing up the corners. There we go. Keep hitting the window button. Again, make sure that you're painting those in at an angle so that way you minimize the amount of stretching. Okay. All right. I could have been a little bit cleaner. As you can see, there's a lot of places I bled over, but I'm trying to get through the video quickly so you guys can start this. All right, so everything is all nice and painted up, and now we are ready to start transferring everything over onto the game model. All right, so let's go ahead and start by creating the normal map and the ambient occlusion map. So recall that the normal map gives it the illusion of detail. So let's go here. And then we'll just leave this as operation 1, normal. And then we're going to add the game model. Oops, not there. Here. And then the high poly, we're going to put here. All right. Always change this to this. And this is where we're going to do something different. Before we would always turn preview off, but because now we have two different materials that we can use, we're going to leave this turned on. And then we're going to browse to where we want to save it. You want to go to your project source images folder, your PTex project source images folder. Okay, and then what is this one that I'm doing? The normal map, we want to make sure that's PNG. So I'm not going to be very creative with my name. I'm just going to call it normal. That's it. Okay, and then anti-aliasing, you might want to turn that on. So we're just baking everything down. Oh, and then turn on smooth source model. Okay, so let's extract that. All right. Now this is where it's kind of cool because we turned on preview and because we're using. Let me reset the camera. It's being weird. There we go. Okay, there we go. Now it's behaving. Okay, so because what was I saying? We have two different materials. We can now use that preview option. So just so we can see, I'm going to go ahead and turn the game model on and the high poly model off. It's going to load up stuff. But then there's our preview. So that's our, again, this is not the high poly model. This is a low poly model with the blend material that we used when we exported it with our normal map baked onto it correctly. All right, so that's map number 1. Let's go ahead and turn the high poly back on. All right, so now it's displaying both at the same time. That's why we're getting some bleed through down here. All right, so next we're going to make the ambient occlusion map. So we're going to go, that's what the ambient occlusion map is going to do, is recall that it's going to preserve shadow detail. So let's go to here and go to extract, and then new operation, and then ambient occlusion map. I can't see, there it is. High poly goes to the source, game model goes to the target. Okay, and then I'm just going to turn on anti-aliasing. The rest of these options you can just, oh, we got to make sure we put closest to low res mesh. The rest of the options we can leave alone. It's going to be a texture, and then we are going to choose, again, to save this into our source images folder. Now for this one, change it from PNG to JPEG. And I'm just going to call this AO for ambient occlusion. And again, we want to preview it on our low poly model in Mudbox, I mean. All right, so let's go ahead and extract that. And it's worth noting that this can take a very long time to do. So if your computer's taking a while to do this, that's normal. Okay, so that map is done. Let's see how that one looks. Let's turn off the high poly model. Okay, and then hit Control D to deselect. And now you can see that in the cracks and the crevices, like between these lines, we now have dark lines. And just so you can see that, let me go ahead and select the game model and then go to the layers. We can see that this is where it's putting the maps. Okay, so if I turn AO, let me hit Control D one more time. If I turn AO off, what the heck? Still has the dark lines. Let me just, maybe I'm just not seeing. It looks like it's not turning that off. Okay, so yeah, it is doing it. So it's very subtle, but you can, if I turn it on, you can kind of see how it's, like, you look right here, see how it's very, very dark. And when I turn it off, it ever so slightly lightens it up. And that's not very dramatic, but that's okay. When we combine the ambient occlusion with the color, you'll see that it gives it more detail than it would otherwise look like it has. So let's go ahead and add the color next. Let's go ahead and go back here and turn the high poly model back on. And then wait for it to finish loading its stuff up. And then we're going to go to UV Maps and PTex. No, we're going to go to Extract Texture Map in Operation. And we're going to transfer the paint layers. All right, so let's do high poly and game model. And then we always want to smooth. And then we want to do closest to low res. Okay, down here we want to anti-alias. And here's an important thing. On target model, you don't want to choose replace existing layers. You want to add to the existing layers. So that way it doesn't wipe out that ambient occlusion that we had just a second ago. This will take a long time to transfer to, so pause while it does that. All right, so it looks like, that is done. So let's go ahead and take a look at that now. So let's turn the high poly off. And then we have to do something over here in our layers. So I'm going to go ahead and select the game model, layers. And why are they not showing up? Hold on 1 second. Let me deselect this. Okay, so am I looking at the game model right? Yeah, that's the game model. Okay. So why am I not getting my... Oh, there they are. Okay, sure. Doesn't want me to see the normal. And let's turn that back on. Okay, next we got to make sure, let's deselect. There we go. Okay, so next we got to do something in here to make it so that the ambient occlusion works correctly with the color layer. So we need to do two things. Number one, we need to put that on top like this, so that that's the thing that we see. Okay. So that actually makes it a lot easier to see. Well, not really. Okay, and then, yeah, so we need to make this a multiply layer. So it's going to multiply through like so. There we go. Now can we see the difference better with it on? Yeah, now you can see it with it on versus off. So you can just kind of subtly see when I multiply this through with the paint, if you look at the cracks and you look at here like around the lid, you can see what it does is it darkens up and creates more of a natural shadowed look around the bottom of the box. So I'm pretty happy with the way this one turned out. Like I said, I could have been a lot more clean when I did these. One of the things I could have done is as I brushed across the top, I could have used steady stroke. So remember that that's an option for painting, just as it is an option for, so remember you use that little arrow. Undo whatever I just did. Okay. So I could use steady stroke when I went across there and got better results that way. But there we go. So we're all done. So it's all painted up, it's all textured and stenciled, and it looks pretty good. All right, so the next thing we need to do is we need to bring our files over, our image files over here into Maya and reassemble this thing in Maya so that we can turn it in. And we don't ever, notice we never actually saved the Mudbox file, and that's often the case that you don't need to. unless it's like a really elaborate thing like sculpting the head. So once you have all the image files that you need off of it, you can just export the normal and the color and the ambient occlusion. In this case, we're going to combine the ambient occlusion and the color together into one file. So let's do that. Let's go ahead and right click up here on the group and then choose Export Channel Merged. Okay, and we're going to want to go into our source images folder and call this something like color. And make sure that you save that as a JPEG file. Notice the ambient occlusion is still there. So let's save that. Okay. And then the normal map is already going to be over there, since that's where we chose it, I believe. Yeah, it should be over there. And my computer's freezing up. There it goes, it's done. Okay, so let's just double check that we got everything before we close down Mudbox. I'm just going to minimize Mudbox. And my computer is waiting until the very end of this video to start freezing on you guys. Oh, shoot, did it crash? No? Oh, okay. Oh, boy. I'm trying to rotate it and it's not working. Okay, so let's try this again. So let's minimize this, and then let's just go ahead and double check that we got all of our image files that we want. So I'm just going to go into the Explorer. Okay, then let's go to our project. My computer decided to get really, really slow at the very, very end of this and take forever to load. All right, so PTex, source images, and let's make sure we got everything. And there's all the stuff we made. So there's our normal map, and this is our combined ambient occlusion. So just so we can see it, there's the ambient occlusion map that we created that has all the shadow information in it. So you can see it's very, very subtle. Now there are settings when you go to bake an ambient occlusion map that you can tweak to try to deepen those lines up a little bit more if you want to. All right, so let's see, the next one is our color map. So this is our, again, this is our combined color and, what am I trying to say? Color and ambient occlusion via the multiply layer. And then of course the normal map somewhere, there it is. Okay, so those just need to be reapplied to the model in Maya. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and start Maya up. And I'm also going to close down Mudbox at this point. I've got all the image files that I need out of it, and you do not need to save your work once you have the normal, the AO, and the color. So you can just close it down. And let's start Maya. So I'm going to go ahead and start the recording again, just to give you guys a peek behind the curtain of the stuff I'm dealing with here. For some reason, this recording software just really kills my computer. I might actually just go buy a new computer, especially if we're stuck teaching online in the fall. But check this out. It's taking like 5 minutes just to load Maya. So it's a nice thing that I can pause the videos. But anyways, just so you can, I want you guys to feel my pain just a little bit. Okay, so Maya's finally done opening 10 minutes later. All right, so let's go to back to our project that we were at. So I'm going to go to Recent Projects and go to PTex Project. And then click on Open, and hopefully this doesn't take 20 minutes to open. So this is the .mb file. Okay, and this guy is ready to receive all that wonderful work from Mudbox. So let's go ahead and hit Control A to open the attribute editor. Go to the material. And all we need to attach is two things. Because we baked the ambient occlusion into the color, we can just combine those here. In the color channel, click File, and then choose your color file with all your beautiful work. Make sure that you are using the high quality one, and make sure you push 6 so you can actually see it on there. All right, so you can very faintly see the ambient occlusion on there. And then next we're going to go ahead and go to the bump mapping and then choose File, change that to tangent space normal, and then choose your normal map. There it is. And voila, look at that. So there is our beautifully created toolbox. Notice again the poly count is only 34, super low, but it looks like it has a lot more detail on it than it actually does because of the beauty of ambient occlusion and normal maps. And also note that you didn't have to go crazy with the UVs uh, to do this. So under UV editor, you can see I think I just used an automatic mapping on this one. Okay. All right. All right, so that'll do it for this lesson, you guys. I do want to quickly mention that the architecture project is going to be coming up, and I want you guys to think of the architecture project as basically doing nothing more than what you just saw me do for this. So like I think I mentioned this at the end of the last one, just imagine that this is a brick texture, right, for a brick wall. Find a picture of a window, stencil in the window, and when you're coming up with ideas for your buildings, just keep them super simple. And then you'll just probably create like, 3 or 4 or 5 different separate basic geometric shapes, and then import them all into one scene and stitch them all together. So just especially because of everything that's going on right now, and how I'm sure you guys are all dealing with a lot of stuff outside of school. Just try to keep your design super simple, right? Don't get too crazy ambitious with what you want to do for your final building. All right, but it'll be a very similar process to what we just went through to create something like this that is low poly but looks like it's very high quality and detailed. So that'll do it for today. As usual, if you need help, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to shoot me a message through inbox. And I will see you guys back here for lesson number 18 in a few days.